Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, that is infinite, namely the reality. This is infinite, namely this universe. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Taking the infinitude of the infinite, it remains as infinite. Om, peace, peace, peace. We are at the beginning of the study of Brhadaranyaka Upanishad from today, which is the sacred tithi of Swami Abhedananda, a direct disciple of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Abhedananda was born in the year 1866 and he was given the name Kali Prasad Chandra. He used to have several divine visions when he lived with his master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. On one night, he dreamt of all the divine forms, the illumined divine forms, merging into one. And when on the next day he recalled this dream to his master, the master then told him that he will no more have the visions of the divine beings, as he has now reached the plane of non-duality, the plane of formlessness rather. Such was the spiritual character of Abhedananda even in those formative years. He has made indelible contributions to the Ramakrishna order. Remembering all that, and before we proceed, I offer my sincere salutations at the holy feet of Sri Ramakrishna, together with his illustrious disciple, Swami Abhedananda, and seek their blessings that the study of this scripture henceforth shall become fruitful to both the self and the listeners. The invocation verses that you all just heard being chanted, it occurs in the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad. Purnamadah Purnamidam Ityadi. Acharya Shankara Bhagavatpada, he commented on select 10 Upanishads, 10 such Upanishads, out of a host of 100 plus Upanishads. And he ignored the remaining lot, probably because those he left were all repetitions of what were found in the select 10. Brhadaranyaka is one such Upanishad in the select 10. The importance of this Upanishad is pretty much telling when we see that Acharya Shankara's learned disciple Sureshwaracharya has written a treatise on the Bhagavad Pada's commentary on this Upanishad. Bhashyam, the commentary on the Bhashyam. Such commentaries on the Bhashyam, such treatises are called Vartikam. Sureshwaracharya has also written a Vartikam on Bhagavad Pada's Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashyam. So both these Bhashyam are considered to be a phenomenal work achieved by both the master and his disciple. It is also of a lesser concern, though worth mentioning, that for the scholars, the Brahma Sutra Bhashyam, written by Shankaracharya, and the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashyam by the same author, these two are two contenders for occupying so-called the prestigious seat of being called the greatest of the Acharya's works. So we are fortunate that we have set forth in front of us this great task of trying to understand with our limited abilities the contents of the Upanishads as commented by the Acharya Bhagavad Pada. We will now see where this Upanishad is placed in the corpus of the Vedic literature. Let us remember at the very outset that these scriptures that we are talking about, they date back to a very distant antiquity, which even the recorded history can dare to take peek. Apaurusheyam is the word that is often used to describe the authorship of the Vedas. Is it because it's so ancient that we don't know the authors? Some people may doubt that. But it is not so. These books are not written out of the human mental deliberations, not at all. But they are all revealed truths. Now, what can we expect from the Vedas? Acharya Shankara answers this query negatively in the introduction to this Upanishad Bhashyam. He says, let me read the Bhashyam. Drishta Vishaye cha ishta anishta prapti parihara upaya jnanasya pratyaksha anumanabhyameva siddhatvat na agama anveshana. There is a classification here, beginning with the word drishta vishaye. Drishta vishaye here means that those objects which are all within the range of experiences, the matters coming within the range of experience, that's called drishta vishaye. Now, ishta anishta prapti parihara upaya jnana. A knowledge, upaya jnana means the knowledge of the means of attaining the good, ishta prapti, and avoiding the evil, anishta parihara. These two are easily achieved, pratyaksha anumanabhyameva, through perception and inference, through direct perception and through inference. Now, Acharya Shankara has summarily expressed his idea of the entire process of scientific investigation. That the entire scientific investigation proceeds along this direction, that first we have a pratyaksha, and further to which there are a sequence of anumana coming up with wonderful discoveries. But these are all classified as drishta vishaya. And siddhatvat, because it is available such a way, na agama anveshana. Such experiences are not to be sought for explanation from the Vedas. So this is a sort of a negative way to say what you should not expect from Vedas. But then what are we supposed to look in the Vedas? Acharya Shankara continues in the Bhashyam, introduction, and he says, but now very positively, Tasmat janmantara sambandhyatma astitve janmantara ishta anishta prapti parihara upaya vishaye visheshe cha shastram pravartate. It's a very beautiful sentence, summarily telling what we are supposed to look for in the Vedas. The scriptures proceed to discuss the existence of the self, atma astitvam, existence of the self. When? When do the Atman exist? Janma antara sambandha, in a life which is in future. So the existence of the self in the future life. And the particular means of attaining the good and avoiding the evils in that life. Not in the life currently we are leading, but in the future life. So from this, we get two doctrines from the Vedas. One is that there is something called as an Atman, Atma Astitvam, and there is something called as a future life. If any person who studies the scripture without accepting this doctrine, the scripture will not make much sense for him. So with this understanding, let us look at what is the Vedic, how we can grasp the contents of the Vedic corpus. This Vedic corpus has a popular two kinds of divisioning. One is known by Rigveda, Ajurveda, Atharvaveda, Samaveda books. Clearly delineated as which is the first mantra, which is the last mantra, and so on. The other is Samhita, Brahmana, and Aranyaka. And the Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka divisioning, it cuts across the earlier divisioning, namely the Rig, Yajus, Atharva. Now, Samaveda is also said in the same breath, but Samaveda is, in strictly speaking, a lyrical rendering of the Rig mantras. So they are rendered with more intonations, saptaswaras and so on. Now, in this Rig, Yajus, Atharva, let us look at the Ajurveda. It has got two broad divisions. One is called the Krishna Ajurveda, and the other one is called Shukla Ajurveda. Now, there is a legend which gives how this Shukla and Krishna have come to existence, have come to be created. But then, minus those fables, if we look at the scholar's opinion of what this Krishna Ajurveda is, they say that in Krishna Ajurveda, the Samhita and the Brahmana portions, they are mixed up. So this collection seems to lack organization, and hence the name Krishna, meaning black. Black also means unclear. So the division between the Samhita portion and the Brahmana portion, Samhita is the book of prayers, and Brahmanas are the book of instructions for doing the rituals and rites and rituals. So the distinction is not very clear, it seems. On the other hand, in Shukla Ajurveda, the Samhita portion and the Brahmana portions are well delineated. And hence the name Shukla, meaning white. It also means being clear or well organized. In Shukla Ajurveda, as embodied in the Shatapatha Brahmana, they say, there are two sub-classifications called shakhas. Shakhas, there is another thing called recensions. So shakhas. One is called the Madhyandina Shaka and the other is called Kanva Shaka. Interestingly, Brhadaranyaka Upanishad is recorded in the Aranyaka section of both the shakas. Aranyaka comes at the end. Beginning is the Samhita, the middle portion is the Brahmana, and the end portions are Aranyaka. Upanishads come in Aranyakas. So this Brhadaranyaka Upanishad comes in the Aranyaka section of both the shakas, both the Madhyandina as well as the Kanva Shaka. Acharya Shankara seems to have commented on the Kanva Shaka version. Thus, the word Brhadaranyaka gets its justification. Namely, the Upanishad talks about the Brihat Tattvam indirectly and directly, and it also, namely the all-compassing reality, that's what we mean by Tattvam. And also, this Upanishad is occurring in the Aranyaka portion. Acharya Shankara says Brihattamatvat here because he says the Upanishad itself is so big. That is also true. The Upanishad is very big compared to all the other Upanishads like Isha, Kena, Katha, Mundaka or Mandukya, Aitareya. And even Taittiriya is slightly bigger, but Brhadaranyaka and Chandogya, the two earliest of the Upanishads, the language is also pretty ancient and they are very big. So Brihad is also very appropriate in the case of this Upanishad. But again, Brihad also means Brahma Tattvam. Brahma Tattvam is Bhrinji Dhatu, that which grows indefinitely, which expands indefinitely. So, since the Upanishads are talking about Brahma Tattvam, so that sense Brhadaranyaka also can be justified. Now, in this Upanishads, there are 3 khandas, each consisting of 2 chapters, adhyayas. Now, there is a first adhyaya is called Madhukanda. The second adhyaya is called Yajnavalkya Kanda or Muni Kanda. And the third one is called Khila Kanda. Khila actually is a term which represents something like an addendum. Rigveda also has got a Khila Kanda, some kind of an addendum. So these two seems to have been added with a different purpose in mind. The Madhukanda summarizes the Advaitic doctrine. It is presented in the style of Upadesha, as instructions, what should be done and what should be avoided, as an Upadesha. The Muni Kanda, or the Yajnavalkya Kanda, the third and the fourth chapters, through a number of dialogues, mutual dialogues between illustrious persons. The Yajnavalkya the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad introduces a lot of illustrious personages. So a dialogue is set between them, of which one of them invariably is Yajnavalkya. And through the dialogue, we get a lot of logical arguments and explanations to show the soundness of the Upadesha forwarded in the Madhukanda. So that's about the third and fourth chapter. The fifth and sixth chapter, coming in the Kilakanda, they prescribe certain modes of meditation. So Phalaprapti, various Phalaprapti. Before we go deeper into the study of this Upanishad, now let us set the stage. We have seen that the Hindu scriptures so far, that they owe its origin to the Vedas. All these scriptures have a grand and an ultimate purpose in view, namely leading the mankind from unreal to real. Now, why should scriptures take this particular theme as the main theme? Leading the man from unreal to real. It's a huge burden on so-called the shoulders of the scriptures to make this journey not only achievable, but should be prescribable. So this is a very huge challenge which the scripture takes upon itself, so to say. Now, that's because of the nature of the reality. The nature of the reality is so charming and attracting that it actually becomes the essence of the existence, and that it is worth discussing about it and it's worth prescribing about it. So this word essence is a very beautiful word in English. Namely, when we talk about the essential nature of a thing, precisely in the same sense the word essence is used. Now essence in the Sanskrit, it goes by the word Tadparya. If we see in reality that all kinds of initiatives, be it worldly or otherworldly, all these initiatives, for them, the goal of the initiative, the purpose of the initiative, and the means of the initiative should always be connected, concomitantly related to the Tadparya. What if not? If not, then the Tadparya will be missing. Let us take a small example. If mango fruit is accepted as the essence of the mango tree, then the goal, the purpose, and the means must all be related to this fruit. We grow the tree, we water the tree, we protect the tree, we nurture the tree, and we multiply the trees only for the sake of fruit. Because now fruit has been accepted as the essence of the mango tree. And if we cut the tree, cutting the tree is working against the very purpose of the purpose for growing the tree. So that particular action doesn't help us to achieve the Tadparya. Let us look at the word Tadparya. In Sanskrit, it is a very beautiful word. There is a shloka which I remember currently in Gita. Shraddhavan labhathe jnanam tatparaha sanyatendriyaha. There Tatparaha Acharya Shankara says, Tadeva parapurushartaha. The Tad, which represents the reality, is the highest goal of life. Purushartha is the goal, aim of life. So that is the parapurushartha, it is the highest goal of life. That is the Tat principle. From that, as an abstract noun, we get the word Tadparyam, which is the essence. Now, the scriptures talk about this Tat principle, which is the reality under discussion. Now, at this juncture, two questions arise. Can we not know this reality through other means? Is it necessary that we have to go through scriptures only? Now, in this connection, to answer this question, let us recollect a story. A fisherman wanted to determine the properties common to the fishes in the sea. So what he did, he took a boat, he took a net and started collecting fishes at various places in the sea. Because from one place if he takes, he cannot come to a firm conclusion. So what he did was, he anchored the boat in turns at various points. He threw the net and then collected the fishes. He counted the fishes and he kept a clear record of what all he observed in those fishes. Evening, sunset, he comes back and then he drew up a conclusion in a long page, a sheet of paper. He found that all the fishes had gills, the organ with which it is able to breathe underwater. They had gills. And secondly, all the fishes were at least 2 centimeters long. So he said that I have made this catch at more than 100 places in the sea. That's pretty large. Therefore, this is my final conclusion, that they all have gills and all of them are at least 2 centimeters long. The first conclusion is pretty acceptable. But the second one is dubious. Even had he farmed the entire sea with that quaint little fishing net, his conclusion would have been wrong. Now, the story doesn't need any further elaboration, because it is obvious that the fishing net that he has used was a defective instrument in order to come up with a universal statement about the length of the fishes. So had the holes in the net been even finer, he would have found fishes of even smaller width. So because of this, we find that the man and the powers that are invested in his senses, mind, intellect, these are all adridha. They are all unstable. They are all inefficient to measure or to come directly, to know directly about the reality. In fact, there is a very poetic utterance in the literature that ignoring so-called the shastric injunctions, the man said, "Oh, I don't need shastras. I will try to discover the Creator by myself. How do I do? Well, the Creator has given me eyes. I will try to see Him." So the man vowed to himself that he will behold the Creator with the eyes. But then he did not understand by then that the Creator hid himself behind the eyes. And then after a long try, he found that with the eyes it's not being impossible. So let me try to listen to the voice of the Creator with the ears. But then he failed to realize that the Creator hid himself behind the ear also. So every sense organ he tries to use up, he fails to grasp the nature of the Creator for the simple reason that the Creator hid behind. Kena Upanishad refers to this in a very beautiful second mantra, Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manaso Mano, etc. That He is the ear of the ear and eye of the eye and mind of the mind. So that is sitting something like is at the backdrop. So Upanishads therefore are the only source of knowledge from which we can come to know about reality. In this book, Brhadaranyaka Upanishad, we have set ourselves to study. It is commented that Upanishatsu eva vijñeyo na anya pramana gamya. Also, we have this utterance, Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. It's one of the Shanti mantras we chant in Chandogya Upanishad. Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. The Brahman that we know about, the reality that the scriptures are talking about, these are all Aupanishadakam, Aupanishadam. Now, study of the Upanishads is therefore indispensable. We have set the stage now. In order to even intellectually ascertain the nature of the reality. And further to that, if one will abide by the prescriptions, it will even lead to the realization of the reality. Okay, that actually comes, we come to the end of the first question, namely, how to know about the reality. But the second question comes, why should we at all study about this? Why should we at all make an effort to know this reality? Upanishads themselves are giving a lot of hints, direct and indirect. Now, some of the utterances are like, some of the Upanishadic utterances, of course, are like an affectionate mother luring a dear child. Brahmavida apnoti param. My child, know the Brahman. Why? Because a person who knows the Brahman gets the highest. So some kind of allurement comes in the mind. Sarvan kaman samashnuta. Whatever you desire, whatever you wish to achieve, you will get it the moment you get the Brahman. So this kind of an affectionate luring, Shastra engages. Now some of these Upanishadic utterances are also like that of a magician intriguing the minds of the audience. As they call in the Zen Buddhism the Kwang, the paradoxes. It throws in a lot of paradoxes. Anoraniyan magato mahiyan atmasya janto nihito guhayam. Smaller than the smallest, larger than the largest, and lo, behold, that thing residing in the cave of your heart. So, this kind of a very paradoxical contrasts we find in the utterances, which throws the mind into some kind of an awe, surprise. And then, hoping that the person who listens to this will get again attracted to investigate on this reality. Now, some are like a master remaining the student, a stated purpose. Atma va are drashtavya shrotavyo mantavyo nididhyasitavyaha. It comes in this very Upanishad, Brhadaranyaka Upanishad, a very beautiful statement which Yajnavalkya says. Yajnavalkya happens to play the role of a teacher in that dialogue, and he says this to his own wife Maitreyi, who happens to be in that conversation, she becomes a disciple. So, it comes as an instruction, as a reminder that this Atman, are drashtavyaha, it has to be seen, it has to be experienced. Shrotavyaha, it has to be deliberated upon. Not deliberated, rather it has to be heard upon. We have to hear a lot of it, we have to read about a lot. That is one meaning of the word Shravana. There are other meanings also. We can stick to the basic meaning. Mantavyaha, it should be contemplated upon. And nididhyasitavyaha, it should be meditated upon. Such is this Atma. But again, it is not the way we have expressed the meaning is as if coming as an instruction, but it is actually not an instruction. It's a reminder. I don't have to tell somebody, hey, morning you have to eat, and night you have to eat, and then night after eating you have to go to sleep. Such things need not be told. I mean, it's obvious that he will do it. So, it is obvious that a person comes to know about the glory of the Atman, that he will obviously be engaged in this darshana, shravana, manana and nididhyasana. So, that is why the vidhi aspect is not applicable here, and it comes as a reminder. And at times, the same Upanishads have resorted to slighting and threatening techniques, like that of a lawmaker, only to convey that this Atman is something which needs to be investigated. The reality needs to be pursued. What is this lawmaker's threatening words? Mrityosya mrityumapnoti ya iha naneva pashyati. Again, the same thing again comes in the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad. And then, parachakaman anuyanti bala mrityoryanti vitatasya pasham. And then in Isha Upanishad, again, the Isha Upanishad, the earlier one comes in Kathopanishad, which is in Taittiriya Aranyakam. And then Tagste pretya vigachanti eke cha atmahano jana. This comes in Isha Upanishad, which is again Shukla Ajurveda Upanishad. Now all these three statements which we heard, these are telling the jiva about the hapless condition he would experience as a result of not attaining the reality. Mrityostu mrityumapnati. He goes from death to death, unending cycles of life, birth and death. So there are plenty of such classified utterances in the Upanishads. In fact, this itself can be a sort of a very useful pastime occupation to cull out such answers from the Upanishad as of why someone has to really pursue reality. It becomes a very interesting activity of Shravana. Besides, we can also appeal, taking a very neutral stand, not going by any of the earlier ones, again taking the help of the Upanishads, can we appeal to the rational mind to address this query very objectively, as of why one has to pursue attaining reality. Now, man is said to be a thinking animal, and there is a strong propensity in him to know, be it big or small. But in order to know, he has to spend a lot of time, effort, and energy, often driving him to the point of near exhaustion. Now, from here dawns the question in this inquisitive man, a very genuine question. He asks, can we quench this thirst for knowledge? It's a very genuine question, because every time he has to put a lot of effort. So this thirst to know, can we quench this thirst to know once and for all? Now, this is a pretty lazy looking and a calculating man's approach, inquiring about reality. But let us see whether the Shastra has an answer to this. So there is one Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, yes. It says, that raises this question by itself on behalf of this lazy man, so to say, asking, what is it that by knowing which everything else is known? Kasmin bhagavo vijñāte sarvamidam vijñātam bhavati. What is it by knowing which everything else is known? The Upanishad moves ahead and advances a confirmed opinion that reality is the only thing to be known. It is sufficient to know the reality alone, unaided. Because, again the Upanishad goes a little ahead and then says, Brahmavidya Sarovidya Pratishta. Because Brahmavidya is the basis for all Vidyas. All forms of knowledge rest upon the knowledge of Brahman, which is the knowledge of reality. A very beautiful statement. We will come back to this very particular statement a little while later. Now, we have been mentioning reality quite often. But what is this reality that the Hindu scriptures are talking about? It is Sat, Chit and Ananta, the three formulas. Sat actually is the essence of life, essence of living, essence of existence. And Chit is the essence of knowledge. Everything we know is actually a component of Chit. And Ananta is the essence of totality. And therefore we get Sat, Chit, Ananta. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, says the Taittiriya Upanishad in Brahmananda Valli. And from Ananta we can derive another principle called Ananda. And from Ananta we can get Ananda also. Therefore, Satchit Ananta is also addressed synonymously as Satchid Ananda. Now the essence, which is the Tadparya, that is best expressed in a threefold prayer statement called the Pavumana Mantra. Again it is coming, this Pavumana Mantra comes in the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad. Asato ma sadgamaya lead me from unreal to real. Satchit Ananta, we want, that is the Tadparya, of which the Sat Tadparyam is expressed by this Asato Ma Sadgamaya. Directly it is addressed. Lead me from unreal to real. And that is the second prayer statement. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Lead me from darkness to light. The same reality is now portrayed as Jyoti, which metaphorically it denotes consciousness or knowledge. Chit means consciousness, and Chit also means knowledge, the highest knowledge. So we get the Chit part from the second prayer. Mrityor ma mritangamaya. Lead me from death to immortality. Now, Mrityu, death or mortality, it is because of limitedness. If we analyze death, why we die? It is because of limitedness. Simita, parimita. Anything that is limited, that means there is another concept or an idea which overpowers. Because of the overpowering, because of something prevailing over, the lesser thing diminishes value towards death. And the opposite of this mortality is what? Immortality. And it is synonymous to unlimitedness. If a thing is unlimited, then we say that the thing is immortal. Because there is nothing else that can condition this, which is infinite, which is infinite. So immortality is said to be attained if there is no other thing or a force that can limit it. So that is the Ananta aspect of the reality. So Mrityorma Mritangamaya. Amritam is the immortality, and the immortality is attained because there is no limit, and because of the unlimitedness, we are actually experiencing the Ananta aspect of this Sachidananda. Thus we get from scriptures yet another totally non-sectarian, yet another non-communal, and yet another non-divisional, and an all-embracing universal prayer. Which, by the way, also educates the man, informs the man of the three fundamental rights he possesses. The right to attain or the right to achieve, the right to know, and the right to experience. Now, the devices to actualize these rights are the three prominent yoga marga that we are aware of. Yoga marga are the three yogic practices, namely the karma yoga, the jnana yoga, and the bhakti yoga. Okay, now let us come back to this Brahmavidya, Sarovidya, Pratishta. Which means every form of knowledge, it rests on the knowledge of the reality, which is the Brahman. We will make a simplistic reasoning to grasp the meaning of the state. Because often what happens, I have seen, particularly even this doubt has come to me even during my formative years, earlier days, that Brahmavidya, Sarvavidya, Pratishta, therefore, a Brahmavid, will he be able to solve a mathematical problem? Will he be able to jump into the sea and then go across the sea? Will he be able to just scale the mountain by a mere wish? Or even put an effort? No problem. Will he get those powers to do that? Does Brahmavidya equip him with that ability to do it? Because Sarvavidya Pratishta, he gets the result of all the knowledges. So this kind of a very petty and a calculating questioning attitude develops in an inquirer in the initial stages. So therefore, we will resort to a very simplistic reasoning and try to put this particular statement in perspective. Say two guys were walking and they saw a huge thing on the way. So one asked the other, "What is this? What is this thing that I am seeing?" The other, he got puzzled at this naive looking query and then answered, "Hey, don't you know this is a tree? You are such a grown-up boy and then you don't know what a tree is. This is a tree." So the other guy, he appeared as if momentarily satisfied, but then he again asked, "Can you please tell me how to identify a tree in general? His friend now began to reply. Acha, you see, it has roots below the ground. The thing which has shoots above the ground. The roots below the ground and the shoots above the ground, they are generally called as plants and trees. Now the guy got agitated. He says, now I shall come to the roots later, but now can you explain what is this shoot you are referring to? Then his friend tried to explain. He said, the trunks, the branches, the leaves, the twigs, the fruits and the flowers all constitute the shoot portion. And no sooner he replied thus, fearing that the inquirer would begin to ask, what is this trunk that you are referring to? The other guy ran away to preserve his sanity. But if we realize the trend of this inquiry, it's pretty interesting. It is evident that the explanation of the whole is being explicitly sought in the explanation of the parts. Tree was considered as a whole, and we got two parts from it, shoots and roots. And the shoots gave further parts. So once the parts start showing up, the inquiry gets directed to those parts. Original question is still unanswered, but the inquiry has shifted to another part. So if we proceed in this fashion, what will be the result? We will end up with a huge mass of incomplete and an imperfect vocabulary. Incomplete because it's never ending. As much you want to extend, that much you can go. And imperfect because the worst part in this entire chain of inquiry is that the tree, which was the cause of the original query, that tree is yet to be understood. Of course, there are philosophers who come and say that a thing cannot be known in itself. The famous Kant theory. Acceptable. We don't deny that. But is there any way to put a stop to this inquiry? Or is it always a tiring process? And always an open-ended process? The inquiry will stop. Rather, the answer to the former, namely the tree, is there in the answers to the later, and this kind of an inquiry will stop when we get the final answer in this inquiry chain. And by working out our way, reverse, if it is possible, then we can get the answer to the original question. The final answer in every such inquiry chain is, our Shastras say, Idam Brahma. Brahman is what it is. Idam Brahma. So you take an object, inquire, finally the inquiry chain will end, Idam Brahma. Take another object, make the sequence of inquiry, and then it ends in this idea, Idam Brahma. And Upanishads, therefore, summarily it expresses this idea as Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. So if Vidya or knowledge means getting answers to the doubts, queries and questions, then the knowledge of Brahman, the reality, comes as that answer which puts rest to all the doubts. Because we can always work backwards. From where we started, we can work backwards and answer the original query, as if. Or rather, putting it this way, there won't be any inquisitiveness for him to try to look for such petty answers to the petty queries, because he has come to know the answer of the fundamental cause. So in this sense, Brahmavidya, Sarovidya, Pratishta. Now that there is another interesting notion which is shared among the students of the Sanskrit grammar. They say that this grammar needs to be studied properly. And studying the proper grammar comes from studying the Patanjali's Mahabhashya. Okay. So there is a nice idea which threads out from this particular activity. So the scholars say, in praise of the study of Mahabhashyam, they say, Maharajyam va shasaniyam, Mahabhashyam va pathaniyam. So, what is it that we will do in this life? Comes the query. And then you say, you see, you must rule this. You must be a ruler of an empire. You should not be going behind a few villages or a few plots. If you want to be a ruler, you have to be a ruler of an empire. And then if you want to study Mahabhashya. So both are so very complicated, so very difficult and intrigued. And so many results are there, so much of effort is also needed. And the results are also very rewarding. Even from the results perspective, it is rewarding. Why? Because it is said that, this is what the grammarians believe, that the study of Mahabhashya will lead to the purification of speech. Now, going along the same line, we can say that the very first objective of the human life is Mahatatvena Yojaniyam. That every individual will have to unite himself with this Mahat Tattva. The Tattva, which is the reality, one has to find identity with this reality. This is the first and foremost things to be done. If it is not possible, then Maharajyam va Shasaniyam, then Mahakavyam va Lekhaniyam, Atava Mahabhashyam va Pathaniyam. So we can go thereafter and after. So first one will be that, first one should be Mahatatvena Yojaniyam, Atava Mahatattvam Anveshaniyam. So there are some doctrines in the earlier portion of the Vedas that propound regarding man that the future birth is real. Okay? And actions which are calculated to produce good and evil results, these actions are calculated to produce good and evil results. And evil dominates good. What happens to the future birth? The person becomes subhuman level. And when the good work balances the evil, he becomes a man. And when the good prevails over the evil, then he becomes divine. So, Vedas through this informs us that when it comes to embodiment, that is acquiring a body, all forms of existence, from the lowest worm to the highest Brahma, Brahma Stamba Paryantam, all forms of existence are made possible through action. That means no objective form is left unachievable by man through action. In this sense, man is indeed a maker of his destiny. Now, instead of investigating how low a man can stoop down, because now that he can perform any action, if he has to commit an action, then what kind of an action will he do? Will he take up? What kind of indulgence will he engage in? It will be profitable to inquire how high a man can rise in the plane of divinity. The Vedic proposal is that a man who is called the Jiva, through performance of actions, he can rise up to the realm of so-called Prajapati or Hiranyagarbha. These two are technical terms, Prajapati or Hiranyagarbha. Who are they? The synonymous terms. He is the first god that was ever born, from which everything else was born. Now, Hiranyagarbha is also called the first Jiva. Now, above this Hiranyagarbha, is there anyone? Shastra says, yes, there is this Ishvara. But this Ishvara cannot be attained through actions. Through actions, we can go only up to Hiranyagarbha and we cannot touch Ishvara. How to go to Ishvara? The Ishvara will have to withdraw the so-called the covering of Maya from the individual and then make him identified with himself. That's the only way a person can achieve Ishvara. And another thing is, it is Ishvara who apportions the fruits of action. And it is because of his niyama, the actions come to bear fruit. And thereby, ascending to the Hiranyagarbha Loka, it becomes possible. Because of Ishvara Niyamaka. Vedic rituals are capable of bringing about this Abhyarohanam. Abhyarohanam is the word used in the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad, of reaching the stage of Hiranyagarbha, through sacrifices. And of all the sacrifices, the best of the sacrifice, the greatest of the sacrifice is called Ashwamedha Yajna. Why this is called greatest sacrifice? Because it is one sacrifice which has the performer, which requires the performer to identify himself with the Hiranyagarbha. Whatever be the identification, that will be the result. So since the performer has to identify himself with the Hiranyagarbha, he achieves the loka of Hiranyagarbha, the first god. So what does it mean? He actually gets the powers of the Hiranyagarbha being identified with the Hiranyagarbha. He has the full control over the creation. I mean, it's the highest level of divinity any jiva can aspire for. The lower levels, this very Upanishad talks about various other intermediate divine levels also. And then it also sets up a condition where one need not aspire for any of these loka, but ascend to the highest reality in this very birth and in this very world, being in this very world. So the Ashwamedha sacrifice therefore enables the performer to reach the Hiranyagarbha loka. But then it's not possible for everyone to perform this grand sacrifice. Rich people, just because I am rich, it doesn't empower me to do the sacrifice. The reason being, he has to attain Digvijayam. He has to conquer various corners of the world. And only then he becomes actually, and he has to be a king, and then he has to have several such accomplishments. So just by mere money or just by having some power, one doesn't get the qualification to do this Ashwamedha Yajna. So for this grand Abhyarohana, is there any other way? The Shastras say that any rite, any sacrifice, it can be performed literally as prescribed with using all the paraphernalia, or you can do it as an upasana, as a meditation. Upasana is a meditation, and Shastras say that both of them give the same result. And the stage is very well set for us now to begin the Brhadaranyaka Upanishad, because the first section, the first chapter begins with this upasana of on the horse, which is used in the horse sacrifice, Ashwamedha Yajna. So, in the next class, in the coming Friday, we will take up this chapter 1, section 1, read the mantra, study the direct meaning, and look at some salient points from the Shankara Bhagavatpada's commentary and try to understand the deep import that is hidden. Before we close, I would like to chant one shloka in praise of the dear Lord. Shakti samudra samuttarangam darshita prema vijrambitarangam. Shakti samudra samuttarangam darshita prema vijrambitarangam. Samshaya rakshasa nashamahastram yami gurum sharanam bhavavaidyam. Samshaya rakshasa nashamahastram yami gurum sharanam bhavavaidyam. Naradeva Jaya जय नरदेवा। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ तत्सत्। श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।